All right. I'm assuming you can see my screen full screen, so please someone stop me if you can't. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about a project I've been working on called Omic Navigator. So first about me, so my name's John Blischak, and I'm a freelance scientific software developer, mainly working in the life sciences industry because that's my background in genetics. I've been one of your co-organizers for about 1.5 years now. And I don't really like these sort of, generic things, but I was looking it up and I couldn't tell whether or not you needed to or not. So just to be safe, I am representing myself, not any of my clients about what I say today. Okay, so the space I was working in here, where I got this contract for, is trying to help out with collaborative biology research. So a lot of times this involves different scientists. So you have your experimentalist, your domain specialist, as I'm representing here with the test tube, the flask. And you have people who are more computational, so statisticians, bioinformaticians, computational biologists. And so they're often working together on a team where the domain specialists are trying to understand the data or trying to understand the results and all of the, let's see if I can see the chat here. Okay. But then they need to interface with the bioinformaticians to answer the questions they have, right? So they might send them a Slack message or an email saying, hey, can you apply this filter, right? And so then the bioinformatician has spent a lot of time just sort of doing this service of just turning back the results where they could be doing more productive work, analyzing new data. So at an organization like AbbVie, where we develop this software, there's a whole bunch of web developers that could help us out. And so the goal was that the bioinformaticians would give the results to a web application that then the domain specialists could interactively look at any genes they want or apply different filters and only have to ask the bioinformaticians for very bespoke, customized analyses. Okay, so a lot of what I'm talking about here is how we set up this sort of web application, how we utilize R. So first some web development basics, so the front end versus the back end. So when I say front end, that means the code running in your web browser, right? So JavaScript can run here, but you can't have R code running on the browser. And then the back end this is some remote server. So this code, anything that's running on here is not running on your actual, for example, laptop. It's running in someone else's server in their basement or on the cloud or somewhere. And so because it's running on a remote server, it can run anything, including R. And so then these talk back and forth. So if you want to get R to the front end, somehow you have to connect these two, right? Somehow you have to run the code in R on the back end and then get it back to the front end. And there's lots of different ways you accomplish this. So one people are probably familiar with is Shiny. And what Shiny does is empowers the R programmer to do both, right? So using this domain-specific language, they can write the user interface in R functions, and that will get translated to HTML and CSS. Then they can write server functions that run R code directly, and Shiny connects them via JavaScript hooks so that it's an interactive web application. So all the R code is running on the remote server, and then you get this interactive experience. So this is really great if you are a solo R programmer or you're only among R programmers, because it gives you all these tools to do web development. But if you run into a question or you want some help with the web development or you want someone else to do it, your average JavaScript developer is going to look at this and have no idea what's going on, right? They're not familiar with the R ecosystem. They're not familiar with Shiny. They won't be able to extend this very easily for you without spending a lot of time understanding R. So the one we end up using is called OpenCpu. And its difference is that it tries to sort of abstract away the R stuff from the front end, right? So it sits in this layer in between where it will translate all your R functions. So if you're an R program and you write R functions, what OpenCpu will do is convert those and expose them via an HTTP API. So then any front end tool, say a JavaScript or any sort of downstream thing, can consume it by querying the HTTP API. And so then other software developers, say at your company, don't have to know anything about R. They don't know how to install R. They don't need to know how to install R, anything about its objects or anything like that. they can query it, get, say, your model predictions directly from this without having to manage that themselves. And it has a lot of nice things built in. So for one example is it translate between JSON back and forth, right? So if you were trying to build yourself a web app yourself, as an example, like if you're trying to build a backend, like with Plumber or one of those sort of tools, you got to convert it to JSON. At least I don't think, yeah, who knows? I haven't used Plumber. I don't want to say that it might already do this too now, but OpenCpu will convert it to JSON or any other, lots of different formats like proto buffers and things like that. And it uses this using this JSON Lite package developed by the same person, Jeroen Ooms. If you've heard of him, he's with the OpenCpu. He's developed a lot of great packages. This is showing an example of taking the empty cars data frame, taking the first row, it converts it to JSON. That's what the downstream application would get. And if they passed back, say, something that looked like this, JSON looked like that, as your R functions will get a data frame. And so you can write your functions just to accept data frames and don't have to worry about translating back and forth between whatever data format the other applications are using. And so Jeroen actually has a public one, a public OpenCpu cloud that he runs. And so this I was just showing to show some example HTTP calls. So I'm just running curl in the terminal. So here I'm saying I want to call the R version function that's in the base R package. And so you can see how it works. Is the way you form the URL for the API is you just whatever server it's on, then OCPU, then library base is the name of the package. So if you had a custom package you installed on your server, you'd put the package name. R means look in the R directory, and then you can name any function that you have, and you can decide which output you want. You can get CSV, you can get raw, you can get various different things, right? So this is a JSON. And so we can see right now in his public cloud, he's running the latest 4.1.1. And then what's really cool about this is this brings the power of R to any other application you're running, right? So if you have a JavaScript app and you want to bring the power of R, or you've written some custom R code, you can bring that into your JavaScript app without having to somehow try and figure out how to call R from within JavaScript. You just call this API and you get the results back. So for example, here's a call saying, okay, I want 3 samples from the Poisson distribution with a lambda of 10, right? So you call that and you'd get that back. And then similarly here, okay, you want to do a mathematical function, take the max, you pass it a vector of numbers, and you'd get back 9. Okay, so that brings me to the tool we brought called Omic Navigator. And to try and give you sort of a high level of how this all works. So there's the R package that I developed. And this is going to do all the data ingestion, storage, retrieval. It also performs the filtering and custom visualizations. But the idea is this is going to be running on the backend server. And then my colleagues at AbbVie, who are the JavaScript developers, they built a whole web app. So there's no R involved, right? They don't need to know R to be able to do this. And I don't need to know JavaScript because OpenCpu is our connecting layer. And so the web app is the interactive exploration of the results. So on the front end. And so the idea is that when a bioinformatician does an analysis, they can use the Omic Navigator R package to ingest their data and then upload it to OpenCpu to the remote server. And then the domain specialists can then interactively just look in their browser. They don't need to worry about installing R or asking the bioinformatician every single time they have a simple question. They can interactively filter, create visualizations, export images, and that sort of thing. Okay, so I realize everyone's not a biologist, so I'll just give you some background on what the heck is an omic. So when I say omic, I'm referring to any high throughput measurement of thousands of molecules per sample. And I realize that high school biology is a long way away for many people. So to refresh everybody, so the idea is you have your genes. So remember, you have one copy of each gene, one from your mom and one from your dad. And so if you're doing some sort of experiment where you're looking at all the genes in the genome, that's genomics. In each one of your cells, there's different number of RNA transcripts produced from those genes. So a gene that's needed for, say, a liver cell will have lots of RNA transcripts in a liver cell, but if it's not needed in the heart, then it will be largely absent and turned off, and you won't find any of those copies. So if you're doing some sort of assay where you're measuring those RNA transcripts present in cells or tissues or organism, like a fly, that's called transcriptomics. Similarly, the proteins are what are made from the RNA. These are the enzymes and all the structural proteins and things like that that do things. So that's proteomics. And then another one is metabolomics. So you have all these different metabolites in your body. So when you ingest from food, your proteins, enzymes will convert them between. And so if you're measuring all the metabolites, then you're doing metabolomics. And so the basic idea and what OmicNavigator tries to solve when you're doing one of these typical experiments, make it really easy to share the results, is that you're going to measure these thousands of molecular features in every sample from multiple groups. For example, it might be control versus various treatments. And then for each one of these features, you're going to perform a statistical test. It's usually a specialized type of t-test, but you can just imagine it's a t-test. You're comparing two groups. And so you're trying to find features that are different between the two groups. And the ones that are statistically significant are referred to as differentially expressed. And that just has to do with some nomenclature from genetics and genomics. And to give you a sense of what these data look like, so this is an example from a plot you'll see when I do my interactive demo. This is called a volcano plot. So each one of these dots is a particular feature. And on the x-axis is the log-fold change, and that's a fancy way of sort of measuring getting a sense of the effect size. So is that gene higher or lower in one group compared to the other? And on the y-axis is the negative log of the p-value. So this is a measure of the statistical significance. So the higher up is the more statistically significant, because that means it had a lower p-value. All right, and so then the way we imagine this working is, so a bioinformatician is going to perform their statistical analysis. They don't need to do anything special or different for their analysis. They do it however they need to. Then they'd install the Omic Navigator R package. They'd create a study package that contains these results using the package functions, and then they'll export a study tarball. And so then the bioinformatician can either share that tarball directly with collaborators, or they can install it if they have running a server. They can install it on the server. And so the collaborators explore the results in the web app. They just go directly to the URL if there's one being hosted, let's say in your organization. But if you don't have someone to set that up for you, they could download the study tarball package, install it, and run the app locally. Okay. Oh. So let me restart this. Okay, so just to give you a sense of what this looks like, say from the bioinformatician standpoint, so they would need to install the package. And load it. And so this is purposely meant to be a quick start. So there's a create study function. So this gets it started. It's just a simple S3 object. And so I'm going to show you some example data. So this is the sort of thing you get after you run an analysis. You have a table. Each row is a gene that you measured the RNA for, and then the columns are various annotations about them, and then the statistical results like the t-statistics and the p-values. So I'm going to isolate the results table, which is we required all just be the numeric stuff, all the numeric columns. And I'm going to use this function called add results. And so what I'm going to do is add results is adding that table for a specific model for a specific test. And so we use this nested list structure. This is a simple one with just one model and one test, but this allows the analyst to be as specific they want. If they want to have different models, they try different statistical models, or if they have a lot of different comparisons, that would be each one to be a different test. All right, and so they would add all their different results and any custom plotting functions and all that. And when they were done, they would install the study. You need to install the app. This is downloading that JavaScript again that was written by my colleagues. You run start app. That's going to fire up the web browser. And so this is where we see, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. So on the left here, we select a study. So the only one here is that quick start I just installed. And again, it just says a silly simple, it just has a model and a test. Okay, so you see here that table now, it's nice and interactive. And here's that volcano plot I was showing you earlier. And what's nice is we can zoom around here. If we click on the here, it'll highlight in the plot. Let's see here. If I can drag, let's see if I can drag, there we go. You can drag and it'll just show these ones here. Okay, but this one's not super interesting because it only has that one test. So I have an example one. There's a link to it at the end of the presentation. But it has all the different available features you can add to your package. So I have the tarball URL and I'm just installing it as a normal study package. Okay, so then I start the app. It's going to open up. So now I can see this new one. It also has one model, but has multiple tests. And this is where you start doing more interesting filters, because a common thing people want to do is they want to know not only what things were statistically significant in one example, but they want to say, okay, I want it to be statistically significant for this test, but I want it to be not for that test, right? And so then they can filter the results there. We also have upset plots integrated, so you can see how your features go across the different tests, all the different tests of your study. And we have different ways of, we have multiple ways of getting in custom plots. So if I select a feature here, what it's going to do is this is an R function I wrote. So let's say as a bioinformatician, I want to write a really bespoke function. I can write whatever function I want. And then as the user goes through the app, they can go through and it'll automatically be run through R and generate that new one. You could have multiple. This one just has just one. Let's see here. And I want to do the, let's say you grab a bunch. Let's see, let's see here. I want to grab a bunch. There we go. You can also do multi-feature plots. So here's going to create a heat map of these three genes I selected here. Okay. And so this is just the code real quick that I just went through. So acknowledgements. So Brett Engelman is sort of the brainchild of this project. He spearheaded everything. Thank AbbVie for supporting this project and allowing us to open source it to allow anyone to use. My AbbVie colleagues have helped me both with the R package and then of course built the entire JavaScript front end. Then Jeroen Ooms for the OpenCpu framework, JSON Lite package, and all the other infrastructure he's built to make this sort of collaboration possible. And here's things if you are interested in trying it out or learning more, that we have a user's guide. The code, the example I showed you with the custom plots and everything, that's available at the repo Omic Navigator example. Everything's developed on GitHub. You can also learn more about OpenCpu at opencpu.org. And then here's my attributions for my icons. All right. Hopefully that wasn't too fast. Any questions?
I have a question. OpenCpu, it's like a separate program. It's not like an R package, is it?
Well, one thing is that it's a lot of things. That's why I usually call it a framework.
Okay.
Trying to get, it does so many different things. So the key one is that it makes your R functions installed on whatever machine you're running it on. It converts into that HTTP API. That's the core thing. But if you install the package, that's what will run that local server. So everything you saw today was just from this local server. That's part of the OpenCpu R package. And that's how that function I ran start app works. It just runs that local one. If you're deploying that, it has a separate OpenCpu server software. What that does is bundles it with Apache to handle all the web requests. So it'll actually set up an Apache web server to handle them all. Because like the thing I showed you just now, that's single threaded, right? It's run within R, it would be single threaded, it would not scale at all, right? But if you were actually going to deploy this, yeah, on a server, you would run the actual OpenCPU server. It's running Apache, it handles all the web traffic and that sort of thing.
Gotcha, thanks.
So what were some of the reasons that you decided to use OpenCPU over like alternatives like Plumber for this project?
Well, part of it was decided before I came in, but the big thing was I don't think Plumber actually existed when this was chosen. It's a good point that I don't think because I mean, as long as I know, OpenCPU has been around longer than Plumber, right?
I mean, when was this project started? Do you know?
Well, I think he started playing with these ideas, Brett, I would think like 2013.
Okay, yeah, it's possible. I think Plumber maybe was like 2015, 2016-ish. So it's possible that Plumber didn't exist if it was that far back.
Yeah. But as far as having used it, I'd say one of the big advantages I like is not having to, because does Plumber do the JSON Lite conversion for you? Will it do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing too, it's a little different about this is it's not purely just like my functions work as the back end, but they're also the bar partition actually does the data in themselves in R, right? So what I kind of do is I reuse things, right? So the front end will call, say, so for every add, I showed you add results, that adds the results to the package and installs it. Well, there's a get results. The end user can use that as they're messing with things, but that actually is actually what the front end calls as well, right? So it's a way, well, the most appealing thing to me of OpenCPU was that it's an R package, right? It will work like an R package. You can use it interactively. It makes it really easy for me to test all those sorts of things. You can run R command check on it, all that sort of stuff. It really is integrated in the R package framework. So that was really appealing to me. Someone who's familiar with R packages, I think that could be seen as a con if you're not as familiar with the R package development, right? You might want something more like Plumber that can be sort of outside of that.
Here's another question for the Plumber versus OpenR question. That's actually a really important question. One, that if you do this presentation ever for the government, make sure you have it in your slides. Does it's called OpenCPU, does that use PowerShell at all, or call to any PowerShell functions at all?
No.
Okay, good. Because that's one thing that oftentimes at work we're comparing, like Plumber. Is this Plumber calling to PowerShell? Is this Plumber? And some of the different packages that Plumber has used internally, they'll use PowerShell and it won't say. But it just.
Do you mean they're calling out to the terminal, like they're trying to make a system call? Is that what you're?
No, literal PowerShell. Like it's a literal PowerShell command.
Okay.
And cybersecurity, depending on government organizations, because of the recent hacks, PowerShell is basically blocked completely. So you have to use other more Linux-based ways of doing the same thing. And then you have to have like a file in there that basically lists, hey, these are the files that we're using this for, but I know.
Yeah, so OpenCPU is designed to be installed most easily on a Debian or Ubuntu system. And it has some security things related to that that will work, I think, by default on Ubuntu. So I would say the easiest way to use it would be to deploy it on an Ubuntu server. You can do it other places, but you don't get all the nice features. Like I said, there are some.
You wouldn't get CentOS, because we use CentOS right now. So CentOS OS, okay. Using Ubuntu. Okay. That's something to consider. Thank you. I thought it was in Windows, similar to Plumber, like where you can call that in Windows, and really it's just making its own little container somewhere, a Docker container, which is still running in Linux. It's just where is it running,
Yeah, I mean, you could run this in a Docker container too, right? That's just a deployment decision. Right.
Because sometimes it's part of the deployment that messes up. And why we have to be very careful of when we're looking at the deployment, are they calling PowerShell? And that's when our antivirus checks and then freaks out, you know. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
that
so I
was
think
my
that
only
would,
question.
yeah, that would depend on the packages you wanted to deploy and use via OpenCPU, right? If they required a lot of system resources, then yes, you're going to be out of luck. Because at the end of the day, what it's doing is giving you an interface to R packages. So whether you call those R package functions via Plumber API or via OpenCPU, it'll be the same limitations.
Or via old school RServe in your own JVM.
Right. Yeah, you could use one of those. Yep. Yep.
Hey, John, can you hear me? In your simple example, the quick start, it was like just a table, right? How did that visualization, how did the plot, where did that come from in the tool? Was it, I didn't see it like as part of the specification of the experiment that you published. Is it just some canned plot that the web front end has?
Yeah, so they have that scatter plot is by default, and they try and make it like a volcano. They look at the column names and try and by default make it a volcano plot, but you can make that be any scatter plot you want.
I see. All right. So there's just some canned like default that it tries to guess. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It was a mystery to me when you did that. It's like, where did that plot come from?
Yeah, that's one of those. That's a really common one, and you can log transform any of the axes on the default. So it's just a way to reduce the number of requests back and forth from the to the analysts, from the people trying to interpret the results. We're actually considering more integration of like Plotly. We'll see how far we get, because that thing's a D3 that one of our front end developers made. But the idea would be we're thinking about making it easier for users to create Plotly, interactive Plotly custom plots. But we'll see. That's not ready yet.
Can you go over your last part of your presentation? Because that last part was really quick.
Which part specifically? What do you have a question about?
It was the very last slide. It was kind of really quick. I think it was just before you did your questions and comments and all that stuff.
Give me a second here. Share screen. Okay.
Not that one, obviously. No. That one.
Well, this is just in case, because I'll share the link to this. Basically, if you missed, if you didn't see this live, right? This is just the code I ran, right? So.
Oh, is that all the code? Okay.
Yeah. That's why I went through it quickly, but yeah, the idea is, yeah, you install it. And yeah, so they're basically this add results function. When you have a full study, like I showed you with all the different things, you're just gonna be doing that a lot, right? But the idea is to try and make it as natural to the programmer as possible, right? They already have data frames, they already have this and that. The idea is just trying to register it and get it in one object that then gets installed as a package and then it's available. Yeah, I guess that's another.
Using GitHub. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Jim, you were asking the decision whether to use OpenCPU or Plumber. We really went hard on the whole R package thing. So all these study packages are technically also stored as sort of data packages, right? So if someone wanted to, the idea is that should someone else, like a developer, want to use our stuff and not even want to call the API, they could also, well, they don't have to call the API functions directly. They could even just do bulk download to the data, because OpenCPU will serve that data as well. They could download, say, as like a CSV directly. So that's another thing we were thinking is we needed to organize the data that would go into this app in some way. And so we went with our package. Because that's the way we get the custom plots in there too. Technically it's an R package that's mainly just data, but if you do any R packages, any functions to do custom plots, it also has the dependencies and all those sorts of things like in the description when you install it.
I have a crazy question that's a little tangential, but maybe someone out there will know. You said at the beginning that you can't run R in the browser, but at least a couple of years ago, I know that the WebAssembly folks were trying to, I mean, they had partial success in getting R to run under WebAssembly. Does anybody know if they've been able to get that to work fully? I have kind of lost track of that project.
I have not been keeping close tabs on it, but as far as I know, hasn't gotten anywhere really further than what you are describing.
Oh, I thought somebody might have, because R is running really nicely in Grail, and Grail also can run like WebAssembly. So like I would assume they could put that all together and somehow get R running in a browser, but maybe just
The only one I've seen is like a guy in 2018 did a Heroku app using RServe, but it wasn't like.
Oh no, I don't mean
Yeah.
serving R over. I mean actually running R in the browser in WebAssembly. And that's what I mean. Actually running.
There is let me see if it still exists.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it for a couple of years. I remember there was excitement. I don't know where Python stands either, like the scientific. I remember there was a project with the scientific Python stack. They'd gotten a lot of it converted to WebAssembly. But again, this was a couple of years ago, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Those
it's
efforts
kind of maybe silly anyway. Like, I don't think you'd want to run heavy lifting scientific applications in some front end.
There is, but there is, but it looks. I'm not sure they're using WebAssembly. Go to jdoodle.com and execute R online, and it's really, they only do up to 3.6.1. They're not to 4.0. To your guys' point, I think.
Can you share the link in the chat if you have it? I'm not sure.
I need to go from my phone to my computer.
Okay.
It work computer. It doesn't allow me to join. Which is why I'm appreciative for the recordings. And I did appreciate that guy's feedback about Python. That was very interesting. And stuff. J's execute. Yeah, execute. Here it is. There's these days, there's like 2 or 3 of them. And they do look really old, to your guys' point, but they're kind of like little free apps that will run R. And they basically just execute R in the browser, but you have to like type your R code. And I think they're more just as like tutorials to teach R more than anything else, but they exist.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's running in the browser. That's not what I meant.
Yeah, but that's why, because like when I looked at it, I was like, this doesn't look like WebAssembly when you look at the back end and stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I know for like Tableau Public, what Tableau Public did for them is they just actually have a separate R server that's running in the back end for all of Tableau on basically online. It's just one massive R server that's that's like version specific. For Microsoft, they're using their own for Azure and Microsoft. That's the reason that they had exported out MRAM in their own package base, is for their stuff, and to get that. So I'd be interested if anybody's able to actually answer this question, because it feels like it should be possible to at least stand up web servers, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we're talking past each other a little bit, Michael. Because yeah, there's one thing to try and make it seem like you're running R in the browser. You could even argue the RStudio server is doing that, right? You feel that's technically a web page, right?
Right.
But all that's running on a somewhere else, right? They're talking about
Right,
WebAssembly, which is a way to compile code natively that'll run in the browser.
right. But if you've gotten it to run on the server, there's no reason that you couldn't then just rewrite that code to write in the web, which is what I was trying
Well,
to bring it back.
unfortunately,
to.
that's not true. Web
That's
browsers-
not?
No, that's why the whole WebAssembly project exists, is trying to get other basically JavaScript will run in your browser. You can't just run R in your browser. You'd have to compile it to WebAssembly to get it to run. And that's what Brian was referring to, is all these different things to run R in the browser. The idea is like when you click on something and something happens, right? That's JavaScript, right? You could do that with R if you could get R to compile to WebAssembly, right?
So you couldn't do it how you compile D3 then with JavaScript then, is what you're saying.
Potentially, right? Like that's if it worked, the sky's the limit.
Because D3 essentially refers to how it works is it actually refers to a separate website, and you're actually just compiling code from a separate website.
D3 is a JavaScript library. You could do it however you wanted, but you could.
No, I'm just telling you in the backend that's what they're doing and stuff.
But I'm trying to explain to you that. Okay, well, it's not a JavaScript meetup, so we don't need to get into this. But you can run JavaScript right on the web page. You don't need to go to another server. But maybe this is proof that my first slide needs some work. So, okay. Any other questions before we sign off? All right. So thanks everybody for joining. Remember, December 8th will be our next meetup. So I hope to see you all then.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, see ya.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.